Welcome back to our second discussion on historical control arms. I'm Dr. Jason Drenning, Vice President of Business Development and HEOR at StatMed Research. I have my colleague, Dr. Nora Janjan, with me again today. She's our Chief Medical Officer. So Nora, thanks again for joining me for this particular conversation. We're going to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on clinical trial enrollment and the implications for historical control arms. So Dr. Janjan, from your perspective, what is the impact of COVID-19 on trial enrollment for cancer patients specifically?
Jason, COVID-19 has changed everything. And even just with our experience before COVID-19, in 2018, the American Cancer Society published a report that indicated that 56% of cancer patients didn't have access to a clinical trial. And reflecting issues related to access to care and available cancer studies, only 27% of cancer patients even had the option to enroll in a clinical trial. And of that 27%, 17% of these patients didn't meet eligibility criteria for the study. So the COVID-19 pandemic has required changes in how we do clinical research, not only just for COVID-19, but also for cancer patients. The Food and Drug Administration, however, issued guidance at the end of January of this year, stating that they wanted to assure the safety of clinical trial participants. They wanted to maintain compliance with good clinical practice, GCP, and they wanted to minimize risk to trial integrity for the duration of the COVID-19 public health emergency.
Yeah, it seems like the steps have been taken by FDA, at least from a regulatory standpoint, at that federal level to ensure safety. On the other hand, you mentioned earlier, there were challenges to the approach of randomized controlled trials, especially in terms of enrollment prior to COVID. And so now you have some of these well-known cancer centers such as Dana-Farber and Mayo Clinic and UPMC Hillman, just to name a few, that are challenged to be able to conduct phase 1, 2, and 3 trials. And there could be some long-term implications beyond COVID-19, even post-COVID-19. Nora, I know that you have a number of colleagues that you stay in touch with in the cancer community, especially former peers of yours that are also oncologists. So what are some of the specific issues you're hearing about?
Jason, some of the challenges faced for clinical trial patients include site closures, travel limitations, interruptions in supply chains, and concerns that if the staff or the trial participants become infected with COVID-19, what happens? And as a result, there are many challenges in meeting protocol-specific procedures, including the administration of the investigational agent, adhering to protocol-mandated visits, and laboratory and diagnostic testing. Additionally, many sites have suggested that they're going to prioritize phase 3 studies only. So the FDA has recognized this is an unprecedented time in clinical trials. And from these protocol changes to changes in study designs, the expected challenges in future enrollment into prospective trials has led to an increase in the use of historical controls. Most importantly, the use of historical controls relates to an ethical component. The importance of providing potential therapeutic advances to cancer patients in spite of COVID-19.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and it's one that's sometimes lost in this conversation. While pharmaceutical manufacturers are absolutely interested in the speed to market and in the reduced costs of not enrolling a control group, really the interest in caring for cancer patients is where there's a tremendous advantage in potentially getting these medications to market. But I want to go back to something you mentioned. You referenced the potential deprioritization of early phase trials even long-term post-COVID-19. We often hear in this synthetic control arm or historical control arm narrative that interest in phase 3 data. And while that is true and will continue to be the case, there could be a trend toward maybe phase 1 and phase 2 retrospective data being used as control arms, particularly given what you've said about some of these cancer centers prioritizing phase 3 and possibly not doing much phase 1 or phase 2 work. So maybe you could speak a little bit about this potential trend and whether or not there's precedent for leveraging historical control arms for early phase trials.
Well, Jason, absolutely. And in fact, phase 1 and 2 feed the pipeline. There is no phase 3 without the pipeline. So let's go back and look at what we've done in the past, especially with orphan diseases and drugs. In 2017, avelumab received accelerated approval for Merkel cell cancer based on a single phase 2 trial in only 88 patients. Real-world evidence contributed to the external data from a registry that was used as supportive evidence. Also, a recent study by Kerrigan in June of 2019 concluded that early phase single-arm oncology trials may benefit from supplemental comparisons with contemporaneous electronic health record derived historical control groups. That study compared randomized controlled trial outcomes to data from a US-based oncology electronic health record. There's significant opportunity for the use of historical controls to play a significant role in clinical trials long-term, particularly given the impact of COVID-19.
That's an interesting observation. It will be very interesting to see where this heads and some of these trends that you mentioned, Nora. But your insights are always welcome and appreciated. I think that's extremely helpful for us to know. That's it for this video. In our upcoming video that we'll be disseminating, we'll be discussing the specific types of data needed to be collected in oncology historical control arms. Nora, thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Jason.